Hey, look, you can keep venting about the broken healthcare system, scrolling on LinkedIn or Facebook and getting stories about all the unhelpful providers, shrinking reimbursements, low profits, or you can do something about it. So today, I talked to a very successful practice owner who's doing all the right things internally to overcome the profit squeeze using straightforward, very proven actions that, get this, anyone can implement. So look, the choice is yours. You guys can keep struggling, or you can take control of your profits. What's it going to be? Well, check out this podcast and tell me what you think. Practice owners, tired of working hard but not seeing the financial results you deserve? I'm Eric Miller, and my best-selling book, How to Become a Financial Beast, is your game changer. Learn how to maximize profits, pay yourself right, and build wealth outside your practice. Download now for free. All right, welcome back to the Financial Beast podcast. I'm your host, Eric Miller, Chief Advisor, co-owner of Econologics Financial Advisors. If you don't know who we are, we help healthcare owners become financial beasts. And we do that through our premier financial advice, showing you how to harness the power of your practice, build personal wealth, and then go out and exit at the top of your game. You can check us out at econologicsfinancialadvisors.com. And a reminder that you can go to this channel. You can leave us a comment, which we'd like, because we want to know that we're actually impinging upon you. And then, of course, subscribe to the channel so that we can have more subscribers, because it seems to be a good thing to have more subscribers. So, okay, here's what we're going to talk about today, because in specifically the physical therapy field, but you know what? It really is, I think, a healthcare issue. Healthcare practice owner issue are some of the limiting beliefs that we have towards profit. And, you know, a lot of healthcare owners seem to have this idea that profit is something that would be nice. It would be certainly advantageous and beneficial to them. But I know that you didn't get into the healthcare industry because you wanted to make $1 billion. Maybe some people did, but most healthcare owners that I know didn't have that as a primary focus. But that doesn't mean that it's not a necessity for you to have a profit. And I want to kind of dispel some of the limiting beliefs regarding being profitable and some of the virtuous things that it does. So I brought in someone that I've only talked to one time. That's it, one time. But the conversation was powerful enough for me to bring him on. And this is CEO of Achieve Physical Therapy in Boston. You got 4 locations, right, Bob?
Correct. Yes,
4 locations. And I want to talk to him because he is one of those owners that has achieved a level of profitability that I think most owners should. And I just wanted to pick his brain and see some of the successful actions that he has and get his viewpoint on profit and how he does it. So here we are, Bob. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Let's start. First, I do want to ask you a question that I kind of ask a lot of people. Like, when did you decide that you wanted to be an owner? Like, do you remember your that aha moment where you're like, you know what? I think I actually want to own a practice as opposed to just be a practitioner. Was there a moment that you decided that?
There was, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What the hell were you thinking?
I worked for a great practice for about, I would say, almost 8 years. And, excuse me, and they were great, great group, great leaders. And I just felt like I was hitting the ceiling a little bit in terms of, my growth. And I saw some opportunities where, I felt like I could contribute a little differently than just, seeing patients and providing care. And, so I did a lot of work, a lot of research, and, kind of put it together and opened a new clinic.
Here you are now, 4 locations later.
Yes.
And super profitable and successful. So well done. When I'm sure, it wasn't probably always like this. When did you kind of realize the importance of profits? Was that something that you just always had along the way? Was there a moment where you're just like, oh, geez, I have to be able to fix this? Or, what was that like? What was that like for you in terms of like how you view your profits, and did they just naturally come?
No, I think, so I started in 2008, so about 17 years ago. But as we got into the teens years, it was, you know, we were growing every year and it was just volume. We weren't making more money per visit. We're just seeing more visits. And so top line revenue was always growing. And maybe the exception was 2020 when COVID hit, but every other year it was steadily climbing. So that was good.
Yeah.
But then there's a period of time where it's probably 3 or 4 years in a row where revenue was going up, but our profits were going down.
Hmm.
And so we were growing, which was great. And so, I thought it was great. Top line revenue is growing. There's more people working here. There's more to do. There's more patients coming in. The problem is we were less profitable. And I had probably more headaches. And so I'm kind of thinking, why am I doing this? Why grow to 2, 3, 4 locations or more? I could have maybe kept it more simple at 1 or 2 and been more profitable with that. So it was kind of that moment where I was like, all right, I got to make a decision. Like, are we going to do this the right way or not? Because I'm not going to keep doing this and growing top line revenue only to give up more profit and spend more money.
Where was it going? I mean, was it just being consumed? Was it staff pay? Was it mostly where did you kind of see the volume was great, but profitability wasn't there? Did you were you looking at metrics at that point in time, or what were you evaluating from that end?
Yeah, starting to look at metrics. I think the biggest thing that first line item on the P&L is just that clinical staffing. And you're paying a certain amount to your clinicians. They're seeing a certain amount of visits. And I just don't think I was really getting that value exchange for what we were paying at the time. Yep. And so, yeah, that was one thing that we were really struggling with.
Okay. And then when you did have that aha moment with the profitability, like what did you do? Like what did you start to attack? I don't know, what was your mindset? What were you thinking? Like, how did you start to change that so that you did become more profitable? I got a bunch of questions on that. Like, how often did you look at it? What was the frequency you were looking at it? Don't leave a detail out, so to speak.
Okay. All right. So to address that first issue, there's 2 things I can think of. One is I wasn't really setting expectations with our providers. And I didn't set expectations with them because I didn't want to be labeled as that guy that's like, oh, well, you care about productivity, or you care about numbers, or you just care about making money and that sort of thing. And it was my fear of being categorized like that or labeled like that. And it was ego. And I realized over time, this took me a long time to figure this out, that I was not doing them any favors. And to be unclear with them was to be unkind. And it wasn't helping the company. It wasn't helping me. It wasn't helping them. And so finally, I think, for years you'd say, oh, there's no productivity expectation. But in your mind as a business owner, you always have a number. And you're always judging your providers based on that. And it's just not healthy to keep that inside and not share that with them because of your fear of being labeled or disliked or disrespected. So finally, I worked up that courage to say, okay, this is what we need and here's why. And I think it's all about messaging. And I think that as the owner of your practice, I think if you work on that messaging, I think that's now being kind to your provider to say, okay, listen, it's okay for them to come in and ask for X amount of money for a salary. So it should be okay. In exchange of that, I think it's okay to be able to say, in exchange for that money, we need you to see X. so I got comfortable with that idea, and I think I got better at that messaging, and I really wanted them to understand the why. And so that got better by them coming in day one. I could set that expectation at the outset of our relationship that in order for this to work, in order for me to pay you what I'm going to pay you, what we agreed upon, we're going to need you to be, here. And so productivity can be, I have a productivity expectation. I have a minimum threshold. I think there's ways around that, and messaging that to your providers in a way that's constructive to the relationship. So that was the big thing. I think the other one is back in 2019, we switched to a pay for performance model for compensation. So a variable compensation model. What I was finding prior to that is that, every year, a provider was with me over time. It was like, okay, they want to sit down and they want to talk about raises every year. But in terms of their volume of patients, it was either pretty stagnant or it was going down. So you're just losing margin over time. And you want veterans, you want to reward veterans, and they help you build your company. And at the same time, you're giving up profit to get there. So I've been there, and that's extremely frustrating as an owner. And so being able to roll out a compensation plan that's pay for performance, I can actually pay them more than I would if I had a straight salary. And I think there's pros and cons with a straight salary, but there are days where with a straight salary, historical salary, a provider is like, okay, my last patient canceled, I'm just going to go home. But they get the same amount of money.
Right.
And that's good for them, and it's bad for the company. But then there's the other opposite where it's like, okay, my coworker, I'm a provider, my coworker just gave their notice, and my supervisor just said, hey, we got to get these patients in. So now I'm coming in early, now I'm staying late. I'm just doing a lot more, but I'm still getting the same. And so our interests aren't aligned with the provider's interests and the company's interests. And I think with a pay for performance model, a variable compensation model, I think you can align those interests. So we're in the Northeast, there's snow days. If there's a storm, we lose thousands of dollars that day, but everybody gets paid on a traditional model. And so again, our interests are just not aligned. So now with a pay for performance model, I think our interests are a lot more aligned. We win together, we lose together. I want them to make more money because it's telling me that they are self-funding it and they're making it happen. So there's a lot of education trying to get away from that entitlement of like, I just need to show up and I'll make X versus no, I got to show up and perform and then I can make X. And so I think those are two big things from the staffing. I think our profession as physical therapists, we're going through a staffing shortage nationwide right now. So we don't have a lot of providers sitting around, but now they are busy, they're seeing patients. And if they choose to come in early, or they choose to stay late, or they choose to come in on a Saturday, or they choose to make up a snow day, there's a lot more autonomy built in now where they have to make a decision, and they're just starting to think more like doctors of physical therapy, instead of being treated like, hourly employees.
Yeah. When you started to implement this, I'm sure it wasn't rainbows and roses to begin with, in terms of like their response. Talk a little bit about like that. I'm sure there was like some moments you're like, oh my God, this kind of sucks. But what did you see that when it got better? Time frame? Was it immediate? Was it, a few months? When did you start to see that it was working to that end, where you felt confident now, like I'm doing the right thing?
I want to say it maybe took a few years, a few iterations.
Wow. Yeah.
But initially, I would say that it was working, and it was. I kind of think of a bell curve where there's some people that were like all for it. Like, I see an opportunity here. I'm hustling. I'm already busting my butt, so I'm going to make more money if I go on this plan. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there were those kind of late adopters that were like, oh, wait a minute. Now I have to now there's a risk of my check being different every week, or I'm going to lose this money. And so the people that were more risk adverse, they were more late adopters. And then you got everybody else in the middle that were like, okay, let's go with it. So I probably took months to roll this out and really put a lot of thought into change management and making sure everyone had that education and why we were doing it and the opportunities that they had to go with it that they don't have in the traditional salary model. And then I think the years part was more tinkering with the plan and making it better, kind of de-risking it a little bit over time and making it so that there's just less risk overall for them. And they were also performing better and their metrics look better. And so making some of the moves we made, we were able to fund more money into the plan. And so we just came out with another iteration recently, and it's very competitive. People are very happy with it. And so it's worked out. And I also realize it's not what everybody wants. And those may not be the best people on our team.
Yes. And I'm sure you got, when you first rolled and said, hey, this is what I'm going to expect from you. And I'm sure you did it in a way that communicated like, this is going to be best for everyone and the company. You probably had one or two people that are just like, nah, you're just in it for the money and you don't care about, the patients and that. So I'm trying to, people need to expect that. You're going to get a little pushback. I think anytime you make a significant change like that, but by and large, I've seen people actually do want to produce. They feel better when they see that they're producing. And obviously if their compensation is tied to it, I think, if you reward people that produce and there's a model that is set up that way, you're probably going to get more from them because they see that. So, I think having that kind of a system in place is really, really vital. But it sounds like you were very careful on the messaging or very thorough on making sure people understood this is why we're doing this. Like, this is the purpose behind this whole thing, which I think was a brilliant move on your part. Because some people just go in there with a sledgehammer and just change, as opposed to like, no, this is pretty well thought out. I bet you that was a large degree of why that thing was successful, because of the way that you communicated that across. You think so?
I do. And I had a lot of help because, sometimes as a business owner, you're ready to grab that sledgehammer and we got to fix our profit. Let's do it now. And you want to go faster than everyone else is ready. And I think so having some people and some advisors to work with me on that, slow me down. It's change management. Let's take our time. Let's really be thoughtful about our messaging, make sure we're appealing to them but being transparent with them at the same time.
Okay. So we have the pay per performance model. We have the setting the expectations with someone when they come in so that this is exactly what we expect from you. And, this is what we'll exchange with you for that. What else would you think that has contributed to, your profit margin, increasing like that?
Yeah. The other one I would say, I would say technology, more specifically, or EMR. And I think with a lot of most people in a healthcare practice are going to be working with an EMR. And is your EMR making things easier for you, or is it making it harder for you? So I think specifically automation, which is going to lead to better processes and streamlined workflows, like that stuff is amazing, the things that they have now. And I'll give you an example. I would say back in 2017, we were on our first EMR. And at that time, we had two full-time people working our billing. And now 2 iterations later, 2 EMRs later, we've probably more than doubled in size, and we have kind of a 0.85 FTE running our revenue cycle start to finish because of the automation that's built in and that tool, which is crazy. So you think about kind of shaving off 1.15 FTEs of admin staff just because your automation got better, your technology got better is huge. We see it in our front desk as well, where like I can remember in our last EMR, we had probably a whole person, one FTE working our wait list, because we all want to refill our, reschedule or canceled appointments. And so we had somebody actively working this wait list. But this newest EMR allows us to automate that. So like that's not a job anymore. It's just a push of a button. Somebody cancels an appointment and the system is automatically emailing and texting invites out to refill it. And nobody has to watch over that. So, so that is huge to have that EMR where, and I've seen this with doctors groups where they have to go with an EMR because it's part of their physician group, and it's like it's making life harder for them. But I've also seen other practices where it's like you get this EMR, it's like it's awesome. It's just something that allows you to automate so much of the manual stuff that used to happen administratively. So I think there's a lot of administrative bloat maybe with healthcare practices that we probably don't need and could probably scale that back a little bit. Which is huge.
I think you're exactly right. It is funny how the same technology, you can introduce it into one practice and it's just like seamless. Then you introduce it into another practice and it just creates a time bomb. I don't know why that is, but could be for a number of reasons. But no, that's great. I think the adoption of the adoption of technology to really help from that efficiency standpoint was another big contributing factor to your profit margins. And then like, how do you handle money as it comes in? I mean, is it like, how is it that, do you plan these things out? Do you, I guess the question I'm asking is like how do you handle the financial reporting? I mean, do you look at profit and loss statements regularly? Like, what's your cadence for doing that? Are there certain things that you're looking for more than others? Like, what's that like for you in looking at the financial perspective?
Yeah, I think another thing is kind of having a really sound like cash management strategy or like accounting process. And so, one resource that really helped me back in those years where the revenue was going up and the profit was going down was the profit first methodology.
Yes.
And so, I'm maybe looking at a P&L definitely monthly, maybe sometimes a couple times a month, but it's not every single week I'm sitting down with this. But it's that methodology really helped us, basically say, okay, listen, we need to put our profit first, and we need to make sure that we're very intentional about earmarking profit, and that we're also earmarking enough to pay our quarterly tax estimates so that we're not kind of scrambling at the end of the year like we were before. And that's been great. We have enough to cover our operating costs, our operating expenses, and there's enough still to pay the owners at the same time. And so being able to have that system was really big. And I know it also forced us to really go through our P&L line by line initially and say, okay, do we need all this stuff? And, where can we get rid of some of the excess? And so there was some cutting at first, but then it was also very intentional about, okay, let's make sure we want to grow, but if we're going to grow, let's make sure we're not doing it at profit's expense. And so having that methodology has been huge for me. And it's something I still do to this day, maybe not to the letter, but it's an easy way for me, easy system to follow. And it's like I never get to, tax season and feel like I don't have that money to, or get those surprises, like, which has been great.
Yeah. And it's certainly something that we try to preach a lot. You're the profit of an organization, while I think a lot of people outside of an organization just think that it just goes right to the owner's, bottom line. And that's not the case. The profit needs to not only, pay for, the owner compensation, which is important, but you have to pay taxes. You have to reinvest back into the company, which are things profits are designed to do. These are all things that, when you start breaking it down, it's like there's not a lot left over. But you have to account for these things, because if you don't, to your point, you're going to get that call from your accountant said, "Hey, Bob, great. You had a tremendous year. Great year. We just need a check for $100,000 to cover your tax liability." And like, oops, where's that going to come from?
Yeah. It's happened.
So all these things need to be planned out prior, so that you know exactly when that dollar comes in, where it's going to go. And It sounds like that you've got that part, which I think is a vital part for anyone to have, because you can't have personal financial success if that's the case. Kind of speaking about that, like, tell me a little bit about how, like, this is, obviously now that you've seen more profits, that's been changing. I'm sure it's done a number of good things for you. It's probably allowed you to save more money personally, which, has probably been pretty nice.
Yes.
It is certainly increased the overall value of your practice, which is certainly nice. Anything else you can, like, any other outcomes that you've seen since you've kind of implemented this system that you think have been beneficial to you and the organization as well? Not just you, just to the organization and the people as well.
Yeah, I think having more profit, in addition to what you said, it's helped us retire our dets earlier than maybe the terms that we
faster.
had.
Yeah.
Right. So we're paying down our debts. We're trying to get, we're trying to keep those debts low on our balance sheet. And so that's been working out. Reinvesting back into the company has been important, but also like bonuses and those types of things is, so it's we're trying to make it in the best interest of our staff. Like, hey, if we're profitable, we're pumping money back in, and it could be in the form of bonuses, but also could be equipment or upgrades to the clinics. But it's also kind of decreased our reliance on outside financing and getting into more debt, because we've been able to finance stuff on our own. And so that's been...
Stop right there.
Okay.
Because this is one of the biggest gripes that I have, is that you can organically, look, the use of debt obviously is needed. And if you're going to acquire buildings and everything like that, it's important, but you don't have to borrow for everything, and you should be able to have a healthy enough profit margin where you can organically, just like you said, be able to expand without always having to incur, like, I don't know what a new practice costs, but it's probably hundreds of thousands of dollars, when you start talking about build outs and, every things that you're on the hook for.
Equipment,
so you can organically do this without having to go into significant debt. But you can't do that if you don't prioritize the profit. I think that's what you were saying right there. Yeah. Which is awesome. That's the kind of message that I just want to hear. So, like, what does the next 5 years look like for you?
Growth, but smart growth. And I think that I was guilty of that, that shiny object syndrome back in the day, where we have this, our real estate broker called, and they've got this fantastic place, 2 towns over. Let's go look at that space and let's do this. And so, like, I think of it as knowing what your clinic capacity is and working with that, staying disciplined with that first. So, for example, if I have 2 clinics and I can have 5 providers in clinic A and 5 providers in clinic B, my capacity is 10 providers. And let's say I have 7 of those 10 slots filled and they're seeing patients, and that's good, but there's still room to grow. But then if I get that shiny object syndrome and the real estate broker calls and there's this fantastic office C down the road that I could put another 5 providers in, well, I'm at 70% capacity right now. And then I open that 3rd office and now I'm down to 47%. And I'm just incurring more expenses.
Yep.
Ongoing expenses, but also a big outlay of cash that I just just built up. And so I think, for me, it's really looking at like, okay, we have 4 locations. We might be 80, 85% capacity. Like we could go a little bit more. And I'm not advocating that you got to be at 100% before you move, because there's going to be some opportunities, they're very timely. So, but getting that, maybe that 90% mark where it's like, okay, now we can start to look, but let's still try to get to 100% capacity. Let's do this right. I do think that the number of clinics is a vanity metric where a lot of owners will say like, how many clinics do you have? How many do you have? And I would rather have less and have them profitable than say I've got 10 clinics and 5 of them are doing really well and 5 of them are not doing very well.
Yeah, that's like, to me, one of the biggest cardinal sins that we've seen. And it's probably the thing that we would try to impress upon most people, is that you want to figure out your capacity level at your current facility right now. And we've had so many people that just started new location. I had one guy that had like 10 locations, 13 locations. And you're right, it is nothing more than a vanity stat, isn't it? And with the 2% profit margin, I'm like, what are you doing? What is the benefit here? The fact that you say you got 12 locations, great, but there's nothing there. So before you start looking to expand, I think what you're saying is just make sure that your current facility is in that 85 to 90% capacity zone already before you would start looking to start another location.
Yeah, and that's not a hard rule. I think it's getting up there, getting close. Yeah,
I think it's a good one because we talk a lot about the biggest expense most people have is just that, is money that they should have made and they didn't for whatever reason. Okay. And that's the way that you find it, is that you look at where are you at in your current facility? Like, what's your capacity level? If I'm at 50%, and 90%, if I'm at 50% and I'm doing 100,000, 90% I'm doing 190,000, that's a $90,000 expense right there that you could be doing. And obviously the profit margins are going to be a lot higher once you start getting closer to capacity. You've probably seen that too, haven't you? Because a lot of your fixed costs are already being paid for. The closer that you get to capacity level at your current facilities, I think the profit margins should be a little bit better, because you're right. You don't have the overhead on all those dollars coming in. So that's another reason for that. So smart growth is where you're going on that one. And then if you got an exit planned, I'm probably asking you some personal questions right now, but have you thought about like how you're going to transition and exit at this point, or is that still kind of up in the air? And
very much up in the air. And yeah, I've given it some thought, but yeah, still up in the air right now.
Yeah, that's okay, because I'm sure you're having fun doing it the way that you're doing it right now, which is good.
It's been fun. I've learned a ton. It's been great.
Do you think it's easier to run a bigger organization than a smaller organization? Like, is it easier now? Like the 4 locations. I mean, obviously you have leadership teams. You got probably clinic directors and all that. Do you find it easier than when you were just maybe 1 location and you were doing a lot of the work?
In some regards, yes. I would say where we are, I think we're finally getting caught up to the point where, and I think you mentioned it, like you just need more leadership. And so with 4 locations, I don't treat anymore. I go into those offices, but it's hard. Those providers are treating patients like they don't want to sit around talk and they're busy, and I don't want to get in their way. But you do need leadership in those 4 locations, and not just those 4 locations, but we also have an administrative call center. And so having administrative leadership on top of clinical leadership is big, and somebody to kind of pull that all together from an operations standpoint and make sure everything is running together. I think we've finally caught up on that, which has been really helpful, and that's the fun part.
Yeah. And then what do you kind of find your role now as CEO doing more of than anything else?
Yeah, probably less in operations. I've got somebody who's really great at that, and a little bit more in the sales and marketing side. And I would probably put that as, projects for new patient growth, but also projects for like talent acquisition. And that's been fun as well. Look at making sure we have both of those things, but also leadership development. And I'm learning a lot myself about myself, and and working with the team on some leadership development training has been a lot of fun.
That's excellent, man. Geez, what else do I got for you? I don't know. I think that we hit on a lot of topics right there. That, for me, it is some of the things that you said were just so simple, but just so overlooked, so vitally important. Because having a 20% profit margin, look, you see all of the things going on right now in the industry, undoubtedly. You see, the difficulty in dealing with insurance companies and having to renegotiate with them and having them cut reimbursements and, blah, 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 blah. And I know that those external factors are certainly real. They really are.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you have to let them impact your organization. I think you're a case in point in that, where, like you have to play under the same rules as everybody else, but yet here you are able to achieve, a 15 to 20% margin or higher. And, that just comes down to the things that you've done internally to allow for that. Yeah. I mean, for me, I think that's the big takeaway. Like, you have control over that outcome.
You do. It was funny. A couple of weeks ago, I remember I was watching TV one night, and I think I was just scrolling on LinkedIn, and I shouldn't do that anymore because all of the stories and all the posts.
Idea.
It's like the sky is falling. We don't get paid enough, and reimbursements getting cut, and we're a race to the bottom. And it was just like, it was really negative, and I just bummed me out. And I went to bed that night just feeling kind of crappy about it. But you're right. I think there's things that are in our control.
Yeah.
And yes, reimbursement, there are problems, 100% in healthcare. And we should be trying to renegotiate our rates, which that's another thing that we try to do. So it's not just growing on volume, but we're also trying to adjust our price. And somebody has to own price in our company, and that's me. And so I think we need to have that process and be constantly talking to our payers about that, having those conversations. But yes, there are certainly things that we can do to be 20% profit margin or greater. And I think it's just kind of that smart growth that I talked about is really important. And looking at those payer contracts is really important. The technology, one thing that we looked at was, do we need anybody at our front desk?
Yeah.
We have not had anybody at our front desk since July of 2020.
Isn't that crazy?
And it works.
Yeah.
But like, we're saving probably.
Is it the virtual, just check-in, virtual check-in?
Yeah. And, yeah, we got to COVID, and our front desk staff, for multiple reasons. My childcare closed down. I've got kids. I don't have anyone to watch anymore. I got to go home. Fine. Or I'm really afraid to get sick. I don't really want to be talking to all these patients. Okay. Or the government was paying them a little bit more to stay home than maybe we were paying them to come in and risk their health. And so we had to pivot there. And we found out, it was funny when we looked at our metrics, like we were still collecting copays and deductibles. We weren't getting them necessarily at the point of service, but we were getting them. And so now we've really invested in those self-service technologies, and we're probably saving ourselves. My estimate, we probably need another 4 to 5 patient care coordinators. So maybe $250,000 when you talk about salary and payroll taxes and benefits, which is huge. And then it's just, there's more profit. You're sharing more with your providers. And so, I stay off LinkedIn now a little bit more. And I believe that it can be done. there's those issues that exist outside that we need to all work on. But I do think there's a lot of work to be done in our four walls. Yeah.
Yeah, and just last question that I have would be how do you attack when you do see like maybe a down profit margin, or when you guys start seeing, if you do see a trend going downward, which you probably haven't had in a long time, talk to me how quickly you address that and what it is that you do to address that. And I guess, yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's, when you're looking at a stat, you start seeing a downtrend, like how quickly do you jump on that? And like, what are some things that you do?
Pretty quickly. I think that if you're going to see a trend over that time, and maybe that might be a quarter that might be down, that might be where I start to see it. I mean, you can have a down month, obviously, but I would probably break down my P&L into sections and say, okay, first section is what's that revenue look like for that month? And then the top section after that is providers, the cost of service, and what is that ratio and that gross profit margin? What does that look like? And is that where I want it to be, and kind of where my target is? And then underneath that is very closely related to the admin payroll. And then I break it down into, we've got facility costs, sales and marketing costs, other SG&A stuff. And so I have a few categories that I'll just kind of have some target margins. And I really want to be intentional about my bottom line and my EBITDA, and making sure that, it's 20% or greater.
Yeah.
So if something is out of whack there, maybe we brought on another admin employee. Again, we're trying to keep it lean and be smart about it. But maybe that's why it's down and we just need a little more time. Or we've hired some therapists, but they haven't got credentialed yet, or they haven't received their Massachusetts license or something like that. So certain things like that we're trying to tease out, but knowing kind of in my head already, these are my targets for my margins for just specific sections of my P&L.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I think, really just looking at it and attacking it, knowing and not letting it just sit there and we'll see what happens next quarter, and not doing anything about it, is, I think a successful action, or not the approach that you want to have. I think you want to go in there and really find out like what's occurring, and then make sure that you fix it, because it could turn into something bad. But anyway, that was great, man. That was excellent practical advice. I really appreciate you spending 40 minutes with me. Just thank you so much for doing this. It was really, really helpful. And I hope a lot of people get to see this.
Yeah, thank you. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.